For the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, what are the latest official forecasts of the current account balance and the net international investment deficit position over the next 4 years under his government's policies?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, probably the most recent official forecasts are the Reserve Bank forecasts released 3 weeks ago, which show the current account deficit for the next 3 years is minus 3.5, minus 4.6 and minus 5.4%, which means an average of around 4% over the next 3 years, less than half of the average between 2005 and 2008. The bank did not include projections of the net international investment position. However, that has improved from 85% of GDP down to 70% of GDP over the past 2 years. It may move out again beyond 70%.
Point of order, the Honourable David
but I suggest the worst.
Speaker,
order.
Mr Speaker, this was a perfectly straight question on notice. Mr Speaker, it was clearly about the next 4 years. The data is set out in the government's budget and economic financial update, and the Minister is not addressing the forward-looking question.
Well, order, I think the question needs to be reasonable. I must confess I was reasonably impressed with the amount of detail the Minister was seeking to give, because the question asked the latest official forecasts, and the Minister of Finance was referring to some forecasts more recent, in other words later than the budget data, and that's what the question asked for, and it seems to me the Minister of Finance was being pretty good in answering the question. I think he probably got out all the information that he had. Does the member have a supplementary question? Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, is the Minister aware that the government's net international debt has tripled under his watch, and how does he relate that to Standard & Poor's statement that it downgraded the government's rating because of, quote, the sovereign's weakening fiscal and external positions, close quote?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, the government inherited forecasts given to this government in, I think, November or December 2008 that showed ever-rising deficits, or 10 years of deficits, a decade of deficits, as outlined in the 2008 pre-election update, and ever-rising debt, reaching 60% of GDP and continuing to rise. We have managed to, in the circumstances of the global recession and the earthquake, to put a plan in place where government debt peaks at 30% of GDP because we reach surplus by 2014-15. So the outlook now is significantly better than it was back in 2008, despite the challenges we've had to face in between.
The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, to the Minister, in respect of his continual excuse about the international situation, is the Minister aware that less than 1/4 of the OECD countries have been downgraded in the last 3 years, that New Zealand is in the company now of Greece, Ireland, Iceland, Spain, Portugal, Italy and the United States? And if so, why does he continue to try to blame international factors for the double downgrade?
The Honourable Bill English.
Well, Mr Speaker, I know there is a funny little world where Labor should still be in government and the global recession never happened. But in the real world, it's different, fortunately.
Order. Point of order. The order. A point of order is called. Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, given that the question asked how he could reconcile his continual excuse...
Look, order. I want to spare the House the pain. Please, the member sit down. The member should go back and read his supplementary question. If he wants to get simple, straight answers, don't ask questions like that. Does the member have a further supplementary question?
Mr Speaker, when...
Is this a point of order?
Absolutely, Mr Speaker.
Well, order. I've ruled on the matter and there's nothing for... The member asked, if I remember correctly, when will the Minister stop using excuses about something? That's an opinion being inserted into a question. It's actually out of order, but I'm not going to interfere all the time. If the member, though, wants to raise points of order about Minister's answers, for goodness sake, ask straight questions. Then I'll help him. But while I ask that sort of question that is actually technically out of order, I can't help him. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, speaking to this point of order. When the straight
What about order? Is this a new point of order?
Yes,
Because I've
it is,
dealt with
Mr.
that one. Okay.
Mr Speaker, I seek your guidance. When a straight question is asked about forward-looking data, the Minister quotes history and makes excuses.
Order.
When you ask about
Order. The member will assume his seat straight away. If he's referring back to the primary question, I pointed out to him that he asked for the latest. In his question, what are the latest official forecasts? And Reserve Bank is an official forecasting body of the Crown. And so the Minister referred to the latest forecast he had. And I thought that was a pretty decent answer to the question. But the member has to curb his desire to inject political comment into his questions if I'm to help him with answers. Supplementary question if he has one, the Honourable David Cunliffe. If he doesn't have one, that's fine. Amy Adams, supplementary question. Order. That'll do. Amy Adams.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Minister, what have been the trends in New Zealand's net international investment position over the past decade?
The Honourable Bill English.
Mr Speaker, between 2001 and 2008, in dollar terms, our net international investment position almost doubled. That is, the amount of dollars we owed to the rest of the world went from 79 billion to 153 billion, and relative to GDP from 64% to 85%. Since then, we've been working hard on the difficult job, I must say, of trying to influence household behaviour and change government behaviour so that those international liabilities will stop rising. And actually we have had some success. Having peaked at 85% of GDP, our net international liabilities have now reduced to 70% of GDP, still far too high by global standards, but at least we're headed in the right direction.
Question number 5, Jonathan Young.